Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Heather Bass, and I am a conservation specialist with Tarrant Regional Water District. And today we are talking about landscape design for North Texas. Before I get started and I introduce the speaker, I'm going to tell you a little bit about TRWD. This presentation is sponsored by TRWD, Tarrant Regional Water District, and they are a regional water supplier. And what that means is that TRWD maintains all of the pipelines and 4 area lakes that are needed to take raw surface water and pump it to local water treatment plants. And those local water treatment plants then clean the water to clean drinking water standards and then provide it to our communities. TRWD also works with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Arlington, Fort Worth, Mansfield, and other cities to provide water conservation, just like this, conservation programs, just like this one. Conservation is an important water supply strategy, and that's why TRWD supports water conservation education, just like this program. And so our water conservation website is savetarrantwater.com. You can go to savetarrantwater.com to sign up for free weekly watering advice that's custom to your location. And so every Monday you'll get either a text or an email telling you approximately how much water you should water your lawn for that week based on the weather and your location. You can also, if you're a Tarrant County resident, sign up for a free sprinkler check where a licensed irrigator will come to your house and do a full evaluation on your sprinkler system and show you any inefficiencies or any maintenance that needs to be done. We also have a calendar of events so that you can see future classes and things just like this one. And then there's a lot of water saving tips and videos there. TRWD also partners with other organizations like the Tarrant County Master Gardeners and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service to bring you some of this programming. And so like I said, today we're going to be talking about landscape design for North Texas. Our speaker is Toni Moorehead. She's a Tarrant County Master Gardener, and she also owns her own landscaping business right here in the DFW area. So she's going to be talking today about some projects that she's done in the past in this local area. So I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to Toni
now. Okay. Hey, everybody. Let me see if I can get this working. Show my screen. Okay, hopefully you can all see that.
Yep,
yes, today. Okay, great. We're going to be talking about before and after inspiration in landscape design today. So if you haven't watched the last 3 classes that we did, I would encourage you to go back and look at those because this program kind of builds on all of those, talking about design and then the plant material that we can use in those designs. So the link is up at the top of the screen there, but we can also share it afterward if you can't get it right now. So I love this quote by Gertrude Jekyll. She was a British horticulturist back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so she's saying here that, you know, she's strongly of the opinion that a possession of, you know, a lot of plants, doesn't matter how good those plants are, it just makes a collection of plants. It doesn't make a garden. So, you know, you have to use those plants with careful selection and definite intention. And, you know, the goal is to form a beautiful picture with your plant material. So in the last comment there, it is in the way it is done that lies the whole difference between commonplace gardening and gardening that may rightly claim to rank as fine art. So that's what I try to do with my landscape design. I try to paint a picture with the landscaping. So you know, hopefully it comes across as fine art. In the first program, we talked about some of the principles and elements of landscape design, and this is just a quick little funny review here. In this picture, you know, I guess you could say that balance is in place, and certainly repetition is in place with the landscape material, and it's very simple. But so it does hit some of the landscape principles, but would you call that fine art? I don't think so. I think we can do better. So, you know, in landscape design, The goal is to analyze the site and what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, constraints, and then analyze the needs of the client, or in your case, what are your needs for that property. And it's just the integration of those two things. What does the site need and what do you want to see in your landscape? So in the first program, I also talked about this inventory. So I'm going to call it the before inventory. So before you start landscaping, you need to go through all of these items and take an inventory of what are your needs, what's your style, do you need hardscape, how do you want your garden to function, do you want water features, all of those things. You can go back and review that in the first program because we went through each of these details, but I just kind of wanted to remind you that this is what I go through before I landscape, do a landscape design. So we're going to start with the before in my yard. So when I started 21 years ago, I had nothing but dirt in my front yard. And so over the years, this didn't all happen in 1 year. We've been here for 21 years, and I have slowly built the beds in the front yard and the back, even to the point where I've come all the way out to the street with the landscaping. So I'm a perennial nut, so lots of perennials in my front garden and shrubs up, closer to the house. And then the backyard, same thing, just had a big sloping pile of dirt, soil, pardon me. We do have a creek, a drainage easement that runs along the back of the property. So there were some large trees back there like cottonwood and elm and post oak and things like that, cherry laurels. But other than that, we didn't have anything on our property. So over the years, again, I've developed the property, and as the lawn keeps as the shade keeps increasing, the lawn keeps decreasing. And you can see in this picture, I have an oak tree. You can see the leaves of the oak tree hanging down into the picture. And as that oak tree has continued to grow, as of just last fall, I removed more grass in my yard. And you can see how it's created so much shade there that the St. Augustine, which is our most shade tolerant grass, won't even grow. So if you remember in my first program, I talked about laying out a cord and I'll see if I can point this out. You can see where I have my orange cord lying right here. That's going to be the shape of the new lawn. And remember, I base it off the shape of the lawn for easy mowing. So this is what I have now. I have added, let's see if I have my plant list there. Yes, up in the top, I have the plant list. So Abelia, Ajuga, tropical giant spider lily, and my new favorite plant, which is Everillo carex. I did a post on my Facebook page about that just recently. So you can check that out. So anyway, I'm just loving how this is turning out. This is a part shade area. I didn't change the sprinklers from the rotors that are watering my lawn. So I knew that all of the plants in this section had to be able to handle the water that the same water that my lawn was, because it's kind of pricey when you start revamping all your sprinklers. So I just tailored the plant material to what I had. So here in this garden, very heavy shade, lots of drainage issues. So she couldn't grow any turf in this area, and all of her neighbors' yards drain through her property. So it was just a mess. And so what we did was added a large creek bed, and you're going to see a lot of creek beds because I call myself the queen of creek beds. I just love taking a problem and fixing it with something that's beautiful and functional. So I think creek beds accomplish that. So anyway, all of the yards still drain into her yard, but now it's captured and channeled through this creek bed that runs all the way to the front of the property. And I'll show you that picture in a minute. But then we added large flagstone walkway beside the creek bed and added lots of shade perennials. This is a little more current picture of that area. You can see all those shade plants listed there. Again, go back and review. It would be the second and the third program in May, and they go over all of this plant material. So anyway, this area has functioned very well now. This is just another view of that same area, looking at it from the opposite end. And this is the front yard. So you can see in here in this picture, the creek bed goes through this wrought iron area here, and then it comes out right here. So you can see the after of that. So her front yard is sunnier. It faces west. So we were able to add a bunch of sun-loving perennials against the creek bed in that area, and then just shaped her lawn so that it's easy mowing. And this is my next door neighbor. So when they bought this house, it was a little scattered looking, lots of crazy plants in there, lots of invasive things like the tall ruellia, which spreads so invasively. Anyway, we ripped all that out and made the area much more welcoming. So added a little Japanese maple and tropical giant spider lily. And oh, and remember, I think I talked about this in my first program, the downspout creek bed. So here's the downspout, and we added cobblestone from there that catches the water, and then there's a drain here that runs all the way out to the back of their property, but any residual will just flow through there and stay on that cobble. All right, remember I talked about in the first program, right plant, right place. Well, lacebark elm is a fine plant, but this property is maybe 5 years old, and look at how close this tree, it's already smashed into the house. And, you know, this tree is going to grow, 50 feet tall, wide-ish. So imagine this tree in 20 years. I mean, it's just in the wrong place. So we removed it and opened that area up. And if I were to put another tree in this place, it would probably just be a small crepe myrtle that maybe gets in the 12-foot range, so that she's got some color in the front yard, but it doesn't smash into the house. So there's some abelias here, and she's got some sedums planted there. So anyway, this is a client in Colleyville, and she had, I'm calling them lame lollipops. We could let those grow out into the natural shape, but they were already too close to the house, so we decided to go ahead and remove those. And you can see again the line of the potential bed right here. And so also we wanted to landscape up the walkway, so you can see the start of that bed right there. And so we created this bed of perennials. So she attracts lots of pollinators and has lots of color when she walks down to get her mail. So this is just a view of it in the fall, showing the progression of the perennials. And there's a few annuals tucked in there too. So this is my front yard again. I just needed more flowers. So again, you can see how I've laid out the cord to sweep across the sidewalk there, and then I have a little inner bed right there around that fire dragon shantung maple. And so over the years, then it has turned out like this. This is a fall picture, so it shows fall aster and the salvias blooming and the plumes on the ornamental grasses. And then this is a picture of what it looks like in the summertime with summer phlox and black-eyed Susans and cannas blooming. I have almost, well, at least 10 months of interest in my garden, because in the springtime I'll have daffodils and poppies, and then it changes into the summer. And these are all perennials. They just come back every year. And then I have the fall interest as well. So this is in my backyard. You know, we all have this issue where we start out with small trees and we have lots of sun, and as the trees grow, then we have lots of shade, and we have to change that landscaping. So this is my oak tree in my backyard, and it's gotten very large, and so now I cannot grow any grass in that area. You can see this grass path over here that used to be, and now it's a flagstone walkway that goes through that same area. And I planted dwarf mondo in between. And I have, let's see, what else do I have new? Prostrata yew, which is a very low growing yew, and oak leaf hydrangeas. And then I plant caladiums for annual color to just brighten up the shade a little bit. So this is my front parkway strip. Sometimes they call it the hell strip. And it is just a monotonous mowing, you know, who wants to do that every week? And it's also, this is continuing on at my neighbor's. It's just full of weeds all the time. So I ended up planting that with perennials. I wanted everything in this strip to be lower growing because all the perennials behind it, like the cannas and the salvias and the phlox, are all quite tall. So I wanted everything in this parkway strip to be, a foot or so or less. So I put Zexmania, I have that list. Salvias, low growing salvias like Salvia May Night. I have Zexmania, skullcap. You can see the list there, four-nerve daisy. So this is a summertime look, and this is what it looks like in the springtime. You can see I've got poppies blooming in the background, and then I've got the Maynite salvia, Snow Hill salvia, the pink dianthus right there. And then you can see these are the leftover stems of the daffodils that are starting to fade. And I like to plant daffodils underneath like Zexmania or catmint, because those are cut back in the early spring, like in February, those are cut back to just to the ground. And so you get some color there in the springtime with the daffodils. And then when that foliage is starting to fade, then like the catmint or the Zexmania start growing up and hide that fading foliage. So it's just a good combo. This is out of Client and Keller. Again, that skinny little strip that's right beside the driveway and then the retaining wall that separates her yard from the other. And who wants to mow that skinny little strip every week? So we planted the same types of perennials that I used in my strip garden in hers. And we put cobblestone along the edge, so when water runs off the driveway, it won't erode that edge of the bed. And this is just another look at that in the springtime. So again, same plants that I used in mine. They're just short, sun-loving, tough perennials. They're all talked about in that second program where I went over perennials, so go back and review that. This is a client in Southlake, and this is their patio right here, and they built an outdoor kitchen. So now it blocked the walkway that they used to be able to walk across their patio, but then that was blocked. So she asked that we create a walkway that goes around that area. And this is on the north side of her house, so it's very shady. So we pulled out these Burford hollies because you can see they're blocking half of the window. So we added holly ferns in here, which that's their mature size right there. They will never get up above, you know, halfway above the window. And then we planted, let me see, I've got the plant list here. Skeeter's broom is a Japanese maple that grows taller than it grows wide. So it's very columnar and fits that skinny little corner right there. And then added the walkway of flagstone and the dwarf mondo grass that only grows about 2 inches, and it just fills in and makes a carpet around the flagstone. But again, this is a shady area, so it just worked so beautifully. I think that's a hosta in a pot. I like to grow hostas in pots. I don't think they do as well in our soil here because the slugs and the snails chew them to smithereens, and the sun declines them even more. So, or the heat, I mean, declines them even more. So I like to do them in pots. So let's see. This is at the Whitechapel Methodist Church in Southlake, and they wanted to create what's called a sanctuary garden. They have a support group, a house on this property, and they have support group meetings there. So they wanted a garden on the back side of that house, so that when people left these meetings, they could have a place to enjoy. And this actually, this is an old pool deck. There's a pool underneath all of that grass. So we created this. These are Natchez crepe myrtles, and this is a red oak, so that as they mature, they will screen this building. And then we added perennials, and then there's a fountain right there with some benches around it so that people can sit there and relax and hear the sound of the water. There's an herb garden. This plant in the foreground right here with the yellow blooms is Jerusalem sage, which is an excellent tough perennial for our area, very large. It's kind of like lamb's ear on steroids. It's got gray, fuzzy foliage. So anyway, this turned out to be just a beautiful, beautiful garden. This is a client in Keller, and her backyard went from this boring expanse of grass to a beautiful ecosystem. So she's got a pond there. Her patio is right off to the right of this picture, so she can sit on her patio and enjoy all the pollinators that come to her perennial garden. And you know, the pond attracts toads and frogs and dragonflies, and so it's just a really neat, enjoyable spot now. This is on the other side of her yard underneath a cedar elm tree, so we planted a shade garden under there. I don't know if I've got the plant list there. Again, all the same characters. There's nothing new under the sun. I use the same plants like I talked about in my program, the second program, because they work. They just work. So we've got the columbine and abelias and purple heart and leopard plants, and so all of those same plants. And I see that she's added some caladiums in this garden as well, just for some summer color. All right, this is on the north side of that same client's garden. So remember when you do that inventory, you got to look at the angle of the sun during different times of the year. So in the wintertime, this is on the north side of her house. So in the wintertime, this area gets no sun. But in the summertime, when the sun is higher in the sky, there's enough light to help these crepe myrtles bloom because of the angle of the sun. So you've got to take that into consideration as well. But it's gone from this mucky mess to a nice little walkway through our garden on that north side. This is at my church garden in South Lake, and we have this courtyard that is between some buildings, and it was just a boring, patch of soggy lawn. It just seemed like it didn't have good drainage through there. So anyway, we created this courtyard there with a little fountain in the center of it and some benches, and I've got some abelias in here, some Yopon hollies for some structure. And that you can see the roses in the middle of the picture. They're no longer there. I've got an update picture to show you, but just a lot of perennials. So it creates just a really beautiful area right there out the back of the chapel. This is from another view, and you can see the black-eyed Susans just blooming their heads off right there. Here's a hint: take your pictures right after a rain. It always makes a great picture. Okay, here's another view of that garden, and this is after the roses have been replaced. I replaced them with Canyon Creek Abelia. I just love that particular Abelia. Very fragrant, kind of limey colored foliage to it. It grows about 4 to 5 feet tall and wide, so it fits the space of a knockout rose very nicely. So, all right, this also is at my church garden on the southwest side. And this is a steep slope, and it was almost impossible to mow. So we did this. I had a crew come out and place these boulders to retain that slope, and then just randomly added boulders up the slope to help with the retention of that. And then, of course, remove the grass. And then I planted perennials. Some really tough, heat-loving perennials. This is a few months after the area was planted. Then this is 1 year later in the springtime, this spring. So you can see salvias and catmint and Palace Castle Artemisia, and I've got some sedum in there and Zexmania. And then this picture here was taken just a few weeks ago, so you can see the Zexmania blooming there. And what else? Some salvia still blooming there, and some ornamental grasses. So tried to have almost year-round interest in this area as well, because we've got some evergreens in there as well, some abelias. So that turned out great. I need inspiration too. So a friend of mine was up in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Philbrook Museum, and she sent me a picture of this garden, and that is how I knew I wanted to do that. I call it the boulder bed at my church garden, because it was the same situation, a sloping area with stairs going down it, and I knew the plant material would be different, but it just gave me so much inspiration to do that, albeit on a smaller scale. But so just look for inspiration when you go on your travels. All right, this is a client in Colleyville, and this path that in the distance there, that's a spa. So this path kind of went to nowhere. It leads to the edge of the bed, and then you have to walk out into the lawn. And I thought, wow, when you get into the spa, you're taking grass clippings in there. So and also look at the trees that they've mulched around those trees. So now it becomes a mowing hassle to go around all of those trees. So I decided to incorporate the trees into the bed, and then use large flagstone that goes to the spa so that you could walk on a hard surface and not track a bunch of debris into the water. And then this is the shady area, so we added a Japanese maple and oak leaf hydrangea. And there are heuchera or coral bells in the left foreground there, and I can't say I really recommend those. I'm sure those are gone by now. They don't tend to do well long-term for me anyway. They need super good drainage, and they just tend to like it up north a little bit better. So, all right, this is a client in South Lake, and wrong plants, wrong place. This is variegated privet on the left, which grows, oh my goodness, at least 8-10 feet tall and wide, and there's several in there, and also Burford holly, and below that Yopon holly. So they've crammed all of those plants into about a 3-foot wide, 4-foot wide bed, way too overgrown and crowded. I mean, you can barely get up the front walk. There's loropetalum in there too, which, you know, that grows, oh my goodness, I've seen 9-foot loropetalums. So to keep that manicured was a nightmare. So we did keep the crepe myrtle. I'm not crazy about the placement right, you know, smack in front of the front door, but it was so beautiful and had never been murdered that I didn't have the heart to take it out. So we left it there, and then planted a Yopon holly over here on the corner to add some structure, evergreen structure over there. And there actually used to be one in the old landscape, but it was too close to the house. So we planted a new one and put it farther away from the house so that it can grow to its potential. And then if you look over here, this is Kaleidoscopabelia, which grows 3 feet tall and 4 feet wide. And it's, you know, one plant in that bed instead of cramming 3 huge plants. This is actually a Japanese maple in that area. That is a Twombly's Red Sentinel. Remember I talked about the Skeeter's broom? The Twombly's Red Sentinel maple grows the same way. It's more columnar, so it'll fit the skinny little spots. Metro Maples carries all those interesting maples like that. Oh, and then also the Downspout Creek bed. Once again, Downspout comes down, it hits that cobblestone and takes it out to the lawn. All right, this is just a ho-hum hedge of Yopon holly, and I love Yopon holly. I use it all the time, but I just thought we could do better on this landscape. And this client wanted as low maintenance as possible, so we used red color guard yucca and Zexmenia. Now there are coral drift roses in there, which, you know, roses have their issues these days, so don't use a lot of those anymore. But also added a vitex down here at the end of the walk. So when you're going on the walk to the front door, that landscaping down there kind of pulls your eye down the way. So, all right, this is a yard in Colleyville, and behind the back fence, there's a 2-acre property there that slopes toward my client's yard, and all of that water would rush underneath the fence. And because they have so many mature trees on their property, they could not grow turf. And there's so many thick roots in there, you can't dig in there to plant plants. So we did, once again, a creek bed. And the mouth of this creek bed is like 10 feet wide because it has to accept a lot of water. And then we added boulders along the edge of that to try to, you know, add some planting beds on each side of it. So you can just see this is how it's filling in with the ferns and cast iron plant, and have a Japanese maple in there. And then this just shows how it looks in the wintertime. So there's still a lot of interest in this garden in the wintertime. But one sad thing about this is there's bamboo planted on her neighbor's back and side. So it's almost a full-time job getting rid of that bamboo. So please, please, please don't ever plant bamboo. All right, this is the same garden on the opposite side of her pool, and the same issue: sloping, shade, and erosion. So we needed to move that water off the area there, so we put the creek bed through to take the water off that way, and then they also needed to walk through that area. So again, did the flagstone with the dwarf mondo so that they could walk down and get to the pool pump area, and then just shade plantings all around it, leopard plant and ajuga. And so front yard of the same property, again, heavy shade and no grass. So you can see the cord I have laying out there to shape the new bed. And then her garage is around the other side of the house there, so she makes that path all the time to plant, you know, and to deal with her garden, to maintain it and plant annuals. So she wanted to be able to take her garden cart through her bed, so we needed a walkway to be able to get through there. We actually did remove a live oak from the front yard because they had 3 live oaks in their front yard, and it was hiding the house and casting so much shade, and they needed to have some turf to hold the sloping front yard. So we kept 2 of the live oaks, and they have a whole bunch of post oaks, so they still have a lot of trees, but at least they now can grow some turf and hold that soil. So this is just a close-up of that walkway that makes this area functional for her. You can have a pretty landscape, but if it doesn't function for you, you know, it's all got to work together. All right, this is a client just down the road from me, and we were just reshaping her front lawn to have a prettier shape to it, easier mowing. So we kind of made a mess of it. We did it in January when it was really rainy, and this is the end result of that. So you can see that nice sweep of lawn for easy mowing. Then on the far side of the picture right here, there's a creek bed that takes water that drains, you know, down the sidewalk, and over here it drains out all the way to the back of the house. And we didn't really change any of the shrub plantings in this garden. We just added some annual color just to have a little blooming going on. All right, this is the client in Colleyville, and again, shady backyard, cannot grow grass very well, so we added, again, you guys are going to get sick of seeing creek beds, but you know, water flows, and and you're just going to have erosion, or you have to do underground pipes, and sometimes there's nowhere to take that water. And I prefer to use the creek beds because it slows down, you know, the speed of that water, and it allows it to absorb back into the ground. So again, we added the same plant material there that I keep talking about, oak leaf hydrangeas and ferns and Japanese maple, and then they did a little cute metal bridge over the creek bed because there's a gate on the fence right there, so they can get across the creek bed and access that gate. On the other side of their yard, they had a weedy eyesore. Every tree seedling known to man was coming up in this garden, and there's a gate, a wrought iron gate on the back side there. So they needed to get through this area. So we created this walkway to the back gate and then put some shade plantings around that. And if you'll notice in the left picture, you see these Burford hollies, how they're covering up half of the window. Great plant, wrong place. So we replaced them with Yopon hollies that will never get above that window. So now we have the right plant in the right place. All right, front yard, that same client, and wow, just a weedy mess. They have, what was the plant taking over in here? Eupatorium, they changed the name, mist flower. Oh my goodness, had absolutely taken over that front bed, that and the daylilies. So, and you can see the Burford hollies right here. Again, excellent plant. It's just hiding the windows, and they have beautiful architecture on the front of their house. So we kept the Burford hollies, but we pruned them severely in February, which is the main time to do heavy pruning of shrubs. And then removed those invasive plants and added in much better behaved perennials, and tidied up the crepe myrtle and tidied up the Savannah holly. I don't really like lollipop savannas, but it just called for it in this. We kept it as naturally shaped as possible. So anyway, fix that up. And this, again, another shady slope. We've got a lot of that going on. We've got a lot of trees here and a lot of post oaks. And so when you've got a slope and you can't grow grass, you can grow mondo grass. And also cast iron. And we put down 13 tons of cobblestone too, because the street up above, the water running off that just sheets through this front yard. So we retained it with some boulders and some cobblestone, and then this is as it's maturing, you can see the cast iron maturing and the Ophiopogon, the mondo grass filling in to hold that soil, and it loves the shade. All right, this particular client, their patio is off to the left-hand side there, but the street is out here, and they felt like when they were sitting on their patio that they're just in full view of everybody, so they wanted some screening. But they also, as you can see right here, have drainage that runs through their yard. It comes screaming across their yard and goes right through there. So we planted Oakland hollies right here. You could also use Nellie R. Stevens holly. And then we created that creek bed. Here we go again with the creek bed running through, because it takes that water and channels it and keeps it running through their yard. And any residual then can just seep back down into the soil. And so then we also used some abelias and a loropetalum, and so larger shrubs that will help with that screening effect, so they don't feel like they're just sitting out in the open for every car to drive by and see them. And then we put a little pathway there so they can access inside the fence. This just shows it maturing. All right, this particular client had their yard on two sides lined with Nellie R. Stevens holly, which is an excellent shrub, but keeping it trimmed in a square at 6 feet high and wide is a little bit of a chore because it's a shrub that wants to grow 15 feet tall and 10 feet wide. So I thought we can do much more interesting plantings. And they also wanted to expand their patio because they have just a tiny little patio. So we expanded it with flagstone and decomposed granite, put a little, right here, a little fire pit in the middle of that, and then water comes, the drainage comes from the left, so we had to do a creek bed through that area, and there is actually a drain right here at the edge of the picture that runs underground all the way out to the street to take that water because it runs right next to their neighbor's driveway, so they did have to go underground there so that they didn't dump all that water onto their neighbor's property. So anyway, planted shrubs and perennials there. This shows that area maturing a little bit more, and then this shows it even more mature. So we did leave some of the Nellie R. Stevens in there and a couple more on the other side of the yard, but just then added abelias and loropetalums and perennials and nandinas to just make it just a more inviting look than a hedge. All right, this is at a garden in Arlington, and it's a small backyard, but they knew a two-story house was going to be going in right here. So they wanted to create a screen for that neighbor. So and they also needed access to walk through that yard. So we planted Nellie R. Stevens and Muskogee crepe myrtle because Muskogees will get, they're one of the larger crepe myrtles, they'll get 25 feet or so, and then Edward Goucher abelias. So again, this is, the new house was going to go right there. Let's see, there it is. So those windows are looking right down onto their patio. So this is what it looks like now. So we accomplished the goal. We wanted to screen those windows so the neighbors aren't looking right down onto their patio. And now my client has something beautiful to look at with the blooming crepe myrtles in that area. So worked out really nicely. This is a client in South Lake, and she wanted a relaxing shady spot. She did all the work in her garden. I just helped her with the design. So she did this flagstone walkway here leading to her hammock and oak leaf hydrangeas and leopard plants and cast iron and ferns and oxalis. So again, all the same shady characters I always use. This is a client in South Grapevine, and all of their post oak, they had beds around their post oaks, but they were all filled with Asian jasmine. So they got rid of the Asian jasmine, and that got me involved. And so then we planted some Japanese maples in the beds that fall, I guess it was winter. And then we started planting shade-loving perennials. So leopard plant, hellebores, there's variegated liriape in there, more Japanese maples, so and some annual color in there too. So it just turned out beautiful, and they meticulously care for their garden. On the opposite side of their yard, the shade is increasing and the lawn is decreasing. So we then increased the bed. So removed the sod and added the compost, added some rock, some boulders along the edge to define the bed. And then this is what it looks like now. Got it all planted up with similar plants that are used on the other side of the yard, but that is, good design. When you repeat elements from one side of your yard to the other, it just makes it have a cohesive look to it. So, all right, this particular client in South Lake, they would have to resod, or they did it with plugs instead of squares of sod, but they would plug this lower area almost every year because it's so shady that area would decline. So I'm like, well, why even have sod down there at all? Don't you want to have a walkway through that area? So we ripped up the sod and added a flagstone walkway. So now and the garage is on the opposite side of this area. So now they can tend to their garden and walk through this area and have this beautiful little bench to sit down and enjoy and wave at neighbors as they drive by. So I just think this is way better than what it used to be. And they used to spend several $100s every year replacing that lower sod. So now, yes, they had an initial investment getting this planted, but now, you know, they can just maintain it that way. This particular client, I think it's considered Hearst or Bedford, they bought their parents' property, and you know, it's quite old, at least 30 years old, and it was lined with photinias, and so you know, they were huge, overgrown, and you know, bad plant. So there's no right place for a photinia, in my opinion, but had those all ripped out. So we started with a blank slate, and this particular client, we actually had to get the other client or other neighbor involved because the drainage runs right through the 2 yards right there. So we added a huge creek bed that carries the water from downspouts here off of both houses. This particular house didn't have their downspouts added just yet, but they now do. So all of their water now runs into that creek. So that carries all that water out to the front of the property. And then they have a little side patio right there. So we created this walkway that leads up to the patio, and then just added abelias, spirea, what else? Lamb's ear in the foreground there. This little area right here is a little bit of afternoon sun. So we planted some perennials, sun-loving perennials in that area, some phlox and salvia. And all right, so this is their backyard, which was, you know, nothing but weeds and some post oaks. And so we created this. Had the walkway, there's a gate on the other side over there, so there's a walkway that leads out the back gate, added a Japanese maple, some akubas. This is the west side right here, so that does get afternoon sun along this edge, so we added some abelias there. Because they can take that west sun. This is just another view of that property right there. And they had, this plant right here is called Chinese ground orchid, or blatilla. And the homeowner from 30 some years ago had that plant, and I recognized it, and I said, do you know what you have? I mean, it's very hard to find that plant at nurseries. So we salvaged all of that and then planted it right back in the same place that it was. So it's a great little plant if you can ever find that. It gets a sweet little violet bloom on it, and then it's kind of a grassy look to it. So anyway, there's a list of plants, same list of characters. All right, this is in Trophy Club, this walkway up the front. The goal was to just make that a little more inviting walkway. This brown circle right here, they had a mulberry tree, which absolutely dwarfed this house. And I don't consider mulberries, I would call them trash trees. Sarah, if you're listening from Arborilogical, I'm sure you agree with me. Anyway, we had that removed because it just was not necessary in this tiny front yard. And so the only plants we kept here, this is an Oakland holly and this is a Yopon holly tree. Those are the only two plants that we kept in this property. You can see it here and you can see it here. And so then we landscaped down the front walk, and because it's sloping, we added little pockets of boulders and cobblestone to, in case any water coming down the steps, we didn't want it to erode along the front, the side of the steps, sorry. So anyway, now that's what it looks like. I apologize for that picture. It's kind of bleached out from the sun, but now they can walk up the walkway and enjoy all that color. And we added a fountain, if you can see that right there, that little red fountain right there, so they get the sound. And they've got a bench right there and some containers. So it's just a really enjoyable spot to sit out there. All right, this is in South Lake. Again, this is shady and soggy. They've got drainage coming from the neighbors. They've got drainage coming off their driveway. It's just a soggy, shady mess, and they couldn't grow anything but weeds in there. So again, creek bed, walkway, ferns, Japanese maple, hydrangea, all the same things, and just made that area much prettier and functional. This area, and we all have this situation where we have lots of sun when the trees are small and we can grow sod. Of course, this is in the winter time when it's dormant, St. Augustine, but they could grow a decent stand of sod. But then after the trees got bigger, the sod went away and it became a muddy mess. And my poor client tried to do his own creek bed, and he has the creek bed running here, but you can see the downspout here and it doesn't connect. So it just poured mud into his existing creek bed. So I said, please let me come over and help you. So now it looks like this. So we have the downspout here that comes across, and the creek, then the water runs into the creek bed, and then there is a drain here that runs underground out to a drainage box in the corner of their property. But large flagstone through this area, and again, that dwarf mondo, it's such a great plant to add around flagstone because it only grows a couple of inches. You never have to mow it, you never have to do anything to it. It just needs shade. So anyway, I just think this turned out so beautiful. It's a very small backyard, but it's just so lovely. All right, this particular client, she has she's a trainer, athletic trainer. So she does, this is her gym. The old garage on this property is her gym. So they wanted to create a garden outside of that. So the poor people suffering inside the gym workout, they could have a pretty garden to look at. So this is getting started where they were removing the sod and they added a fountain and the flagstone, and then now it looks like that. And he actually redid all the flagstone himself. I mean, look at the size of these things. He's a trainer as well, so he got his workout that day. Anyway, they painted the gym and added all these perennials, so now it's just a really enjoyable walk to work. How's that, huh? All right, so this particular client in Trophy Club, they started removing the shrubs that were here and then called me in to help them. So I don't particularly care for tall columnar shrubs at the entryway. I just think it's crowded looking and it's not inviting. So you can see I have the orange line painted there for what will be the new shape. And so now you can see the completed project there. So, and again, oops, sorry about that. The downspout, there's a downspout back behind there, and it comes out onto that cobble right here. Again, downspout cobble. And we've got ornamental grasses and some shrubs in there. There's a crepe myrtle on the right-hand side, and ornamental grasses and just phlox. So turned out really pretty. All right, this is the right plant in the wrong place. Sorry about that picture. It was, I think, taken off of Google Earth or something. But this is Nellie R. Stevens holly. And if you go back to my previous program where I showed it next to a light pole that is probably 30 feet tall and it's growing up, you know, more than halfway. So it's over 15 feet tall and 10 feet wide. And we've got, I think I counted earlier, 10 of them in a little 2-foot wide bed. These poor plants, they are just chopped to smithereens to try to keep them in that skinny little bed. Oh my goodness. So I wanted to show you a small landscape. You know, you don't have to have a huge property to improve it. So look at how sweet that looks now. We've got the appropriate size plants in this bed. And, you know, this is a Burgundy Hearts red bud right there, and added kaleidoscope abelia and some Burford hollies and small nandinas. And then we just did perennials in this area right here. And this house does not have gutters. Oops, does not have gutters. Sorry about that. So right here, this valley, we knew that it would be dumping water right there. So we put a little cut through right here of cobblestone so the water could drain out there. And then also as it hits the sidewalk, we knew that it would be draining along there. So added cobble so it doesn't keep washing out the bed. So that's the point for the cobble there. But this is a brand new landscape. It will fill in. But everything now is appropriately sized, and the poor Nellie R. Stevens are out of their misery. All right, this is a landscape in South Lake, and you know, they had some halfway decent shrubs in there. They had some, well, sort of Yopon hollies, but there's that juniper that's pruned quite interestingly, and then the loropetalums, there's 3 of them crammed back there by the window, and you know, had to be pruned so much to keep them in a little ball and to keep them that small. And then the Indian hawthorns all had entomosporium fungal leaf spots, so they had to go. So anyway, we created this. So everything has been placed spaced properly, like these Yopon hollies below the fountain are all placed I like to space them about 45 inches on center. That way they can grow 3 feet wide and still have space between them. This is Burford holly, so it can grow 4 feet tall and wide and fill that space with minimal pruning. You know, I like to do once a year prune, maybe twice a year prune. So if it doesn't fit that parameter, I find another shrub. It is a little high maintenance because they've got a fountain in here now, but we created this walkway that goes over to the hose. So we were hoping to get it on autofill, but that didn't work out. So they do have to fill it by the hose. And I don't care for these little lollipops, but the plan is to let this grow out into maturity. And that will, I remember showing on one of the other programs, how within 3 years it will grow out to have a natural shape to it, and it will no longer be a high maintenance, actually dangerous pruning, because you have to climb on a ladder to get to those. Anyway, and I like to use annual color right by the front walkway, and because the walkway is slanted here, there was erosion through here, so then cobble is added to deal with that erosion right there. So, all right, this house, it's just blocked by the large shrubs. They're just too big for that spot. And of course, this live oak was just majestic live oak, creating so much shade underneath and in the whole front yard slope, so it was eroding. And so what we did is put in much smaller shrubs up against the house so they won't ever grow over the windows. You'll be able to see. Their son was home, and when we took out those shrubs, he was like, wow, it's like somebody turned the light on, because they were finally getting some light inside the house. Anyway, we took all of we didn't have to buy any liriope for this ground cover bed. We just dug it up from where it was scattered throughout the landscape and split it apart, and then spaced it out in this bed. And since it was a slope, we added boulders to retain that slope. And you can see how high the soil was built on this tree before, when that ground cover was tight up against the trunk like that. So we knocked all that soil off of there, and so hopefully that tree will breathe a sigh of relief. All right, let's see here. Yep, okay, so this is one of my very last jobs. In fact, we finished it today. Shady erosion, it's in South Lake. Water was just screaming down here, and it looks like there's grass planted right there, but it's just annual ryegrass. So to hold the soil in the wintertime, it's so shady. Once that dies out, there was nothing but sand. And so they also have another challenge for this yard is they have a spring right here, so it stays soggy, and up here soggy, constant seeping down that hill. So you can kind of see an orange line right there. I said, let's put a row of boulders right there and build that up and slow that slope down a little bit. And then again, some more top stone that we put there. So this is the midpoint of the job, where we confined the grass, the turf, St. Augustine turf, that was actually sort of thriving. So we, corralled that off, and then added some boulders up there to slow that slope down. And then this chop stone in the middle of the picture here is to block off a future ground cover bed. So here is the finished product. So up here, you can barely see it, but we planted a plant called golden variegated sweet flag. It will actually grow in a pond. It loves water. So this area up here where the spring is constantly seeping water, and that plant will be so happy. And then it will clump and spread, so it will fill that whole area. And then we planted this whole section of ground cover of mondo, regular mondo, which grows about 6-8 inches in that area to hold that soil. And then below, we came down, stair-stepped that with holly ferns, and then we put some cast iron in here. And then this whole limey front edge is that Everillo carex that will grow about 18 inches tall and wide and very drapey. So we'll have that really soft, limey front edge with the deep green of the holly ferns behind it. And then the whole front edge there is a ground cover bed of the mondo again. It just shows a continuation of that mondo bed. And again, slope right here, water rushing through here, washing out, going down onto the driveway. And they have a lower creek bed that's down at the bottom of their property, and all of the sand from uphill was washing into that creek bed and filling it in, rendering it non-functional. So they called me for help, and I said, we've got to take care of the upper erosion before we can fix the lower creek bed. So this is that attempt. And we're waiting for a gully washer to make sure it worked, because again, it looks good, but it's got to function. It has got to hold the erosion, or we didn't succeed. I can't imagine that it won't, because we have planted heavily and diverted water, and so I think, and slowed it down by terracing it all. So I think we've got a winner here. So on the other side, there's more shade, more erosion. Again, just scrappy little grass growing right here. And this is the driveway over onto the left-hand side. So, and the street, water screaming off the street, through the culvert, down this slope. So we created a huge forked creek bed that takes water from the left-hand side and then off of the driveway, and all of that water then runs 150 feet down to the back of the property where there is a real creek. And there is an underground drain that comes in from the left-hand side here, because we wanted to have a walkway, so we ran a drain that empties out right there, and then that will continue on down the creek bed. So all of the same plants that were used on the other side of the yard, but on this side, we just added the small Japanese maple, this Crimson Queen right here, and then Creeping Jenny is a ground cover below, and Harbor Bell Nandina, which is a low-growing spreading Nandina, because as much spreading and slope holding that we could do in this property is what we needed to do. So anyway, that's all I've got for you. I hope that you are inspired by that. Again, I have a blog, and I post a newsletter on there with garden tips all the time, and I post plant information on Facebook, and before and afters on Facebook as well, so you can follow me and catch up with some more before and afters that I do. And then I hope you join us next week as well, because we have a Q&A coming up, so just ask me easy questions. Anyway, that's all I have for you. I hope that you are inspired and enjoyed this. And Heather, I'll turn it back to you if you've got anything more.
Great, yeah. Thank you so much, Toni. That was great.
You're welcome.
I am so inspired now. Those are so many beautiful pictures. I'm definitely thinking about a creek bed now.
Good.
Yeah, definitely. And so, yeah, like Toni said, we do have a program next week that is next Wednesday, same time, and that is a Q&A. And so if you want to ask some kind of more in-depth questions, or if you have some more general questions also, we have also, besides just Toni, Steve Cheney, who is a Texas A&M AgriLife horticulture extension agent, will also be there. And he knows, pretty much everything about anything that has to do with landscaping. And so he can fill in
questions.
he can fill in any gaps that Toni does. He's also a lawn expert and everything. So he's great about talking about lawns and everything. So we'll take a few questions today, not a ton. And then if you have, like I said, a more in-depth question, or if your question doesn't get taken today, definitely tune in next week for that. And I'll see. And then we can get it answered then. And that's a full hour long, where we'll have two experts there just taking questions. So let me see here. There are a few questions already in here. So can you talk a little bit about how you construct the creek bed, like
Sure.
what type of lining you put underneath, that type of thing?
Sure. Well, we swale it out. So, dig it down at least probably 6 inches and deeper in the center. And what I like to do then is take a garden hose from what will be the entry point and run the water to make sure the water is flowing. And if you have any little high spots in there, then you can go and tweak those little areas and make sure it's flowing. And then we lay down landscape fabric, usually a heavy duty landscape fabric that is, rated for 20 year, and lay that down and then put the rocks on top of that. That's the only time I use landscape fabric, is under cobblestone or rock, because it keeps the rock from sinking down into the soil. I never use it in garden beds. So anyway, I hope that helps. But yeah, and then I just kind of tweak it as far as I like to make it look as natural as possible. I mean, you are creating it from, you're creating it, so it's not really natural, but try to make it look as natural as possible by adding some larger cobble, like 12-inch cobble along the edge a little bit, not just lined up, but like randomly here and there, and then do some larger boulders along the edge and the smaller cobble down the center. But you need to use 3 to 5-inch cobble. If you've got a lot of water running through, if you try to use pea gravel or a little 1 to 2-inch cobble, the water is going to move it. So you need to use, larger cobble, because we don't get nice little soft soaking rains here in Texas like they do in Oregon. They're gully washers, and so that water is forceful. So
yeah, definitely. Great. Yeah, that was wonderful. And also the great thing, right, about, like you said, about the size of the rocks, like the larger or the more velocity, I guess, of water coming down, maybe the bigger rocks you want to use to try to slow that down and everything. And that's
right.
also the great thing about these creek beds, right? Because you're slowing down the water. So it can also help your water use, because you're keeping that water in your landscape and letting it soak into your soil instead of it just rushing right off and going into the street or whatever, and then you don't get any of the benefits.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Exactly.
there's so many great benefits to that. Not only are they beautiful, but yeah, and a lot of people have drainage issues, in their lawn. So it's good to know that there's an easy solution to go ahead and divert that stormwater.
The only thing I do want to point out too is the only maintenance that you have to do is you have to blow them out. You have to keep the debris out of them. So when the leaves fall in the winter, fall, whatever, you have to blow those out, because leaves that decompose become compost, and if the compost fills in your creek bed, you have now rendered it useless. So you have to keep that blowed out. But it's really easy. I mean, you mow your lawn every week. Just take your blower and blow it off. So it's really, really an easy maintenance thing.
Yeah, definitely want to keep it clear so that it's doing its thing. And also those rocks, they'll be growing microbes and everything, which also help clean the water, right, as it goes off of your property and goes into our local creeks and things like that. So that's great for our environment.
And the lizards like to live around the rocks, and it's just a little microclimate in there. I just love them. So.
It does create some good habitat for some lizards and maybe some frogs too, some toads, things like that. Yeah, definitely attracts some cool stuff. All right, let's see about another question here. Good shady, and just talk a little bit again about good plants for slopes, shady slopes.
Sure, great question. Yes, again, regular mondo. I wouldn't use the dwarf mondo on a slope because it spreads so slowly. You would have to spend a fortune to get it planted heavily enough to retain. But if you have a small area, so regular mondo, it spreads much quicker. Liriope, big blue liriope, which is there's Liriope muscari and there's Liriope spicata. So the spicata is the spreading runner type. And so if you've heard of silver dragon, it's the kind of silvery grayish colored. It's very stark white and green striped. That is a spicata, and it's a spreading. So that is excellent on a slope. And big blue will spread too. It's a little more clumpy as opposed to just solid spreading. But Liriope can handle a little bit more sun than Mondo can, so either of those work great. And again, as I mentioned, that sweet flag, if you have a really wet area that you need to retain, that is an awesome plant for that. So those would be my top. Of course, you can use Asian jasmine, purple winter creeper, but my problem with vining ground covers underneath trees is you can't rake them without snagging on your rake, and it's hard to blow them out. So I just prefer to use a grassy type, whether it be Liriope or Mondo, because you can rake those out, keep them clean, and you buzz them down. Mondo, you don't have to do anything to, but Liriope, if you buzz it down with a weed eater once a year, it sends up all new fresh growth, and it looks really pretty and fresh every year. So I hope that helps.
Great. Yeah, those are some excellent suggestions. Okay, so one last question. We'll take one more. And then, like I said, if you have a more in-depth question, join us definitely next week, Wednesday at 7 p.m. and we'll be doing the Q&A. And also, you can see on the screen now the savetarrantwater.com/events. That's where you can go to access that event, get the registration, get the link and everything so that you can get to it. So one last question. I saw you had a lot of different beds that were landscapes that had been converted, I guess, from turf. So whenever you're just looking at, like, say, a straight turf lawn, how do you kind of decide like where to put those beds?
Well, that's a good question. I have to stare at it a while. I mean, it depends on what the client is. I pick their brain, and they, if they have a view that they see out this window and they want to see something pretty there, well, that's where I start. What are you wanting to see? Do you want to screen something? Do you want a perennial bed here? So I just have to, find out what they want. And of course, if you have a shade situation, that tells you where the beds go because you can't grow turf there. But yeah, you have to stare at it and go through that inventory and figure out what you want to see and where you want to see it. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Right. Yeah,
Every
definitely.
landscape is different.
Sure,
So
sure. Well, and I noticed also you looked a lot at where people are walking and creating
sure,
paths and then creating
sure.
kind of something next to that path, right? So where people
Right.
are
Again,
moving.
your garden's got to
Yeah.
function for you, and you've got trips to the garage and you've got trips to the compost
Hmm.
pile and wherever the place that, so you got those traffic areas and you have to figure those out and make those areas functional for yourself as well.
Hmm. Definitely. And I know you also talked about making sure that you can access your garden to maintenance it, like to go and tend to your garden. And I think that's a great thing to think about too, because maybe everyone doesn't think about actually tending to those plants, after you put them in. So it's good to say, like you need to access those plants, right? So that you can prune them and everything. So that's a great thing to think
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Because you don't want to be stomping through your beds. When you create
about.
your beds, you want that soil to stay nice and fluffy. And if you're tromping through it all the time to get access to it, you're just destroying that soil structure again. So create those walkways through it so that you
Hmm.
have those designated walkways, and then you can keep your beds, the soil fluffier. So,
Yeah, yeah, looking nice. Okay, great. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up and then we'll see
okay.
you next week. So, this has been Toni Moorehead. Again, she's a Tarrant County Master Gardener and she owns her own landscaping business here in DFW. And she'll be here next week along with Steve Cheney, a Texas A&M Agriculture AgriLife Extension agent to answer even more in-depth questions. And again, you can go to savetarrantwater.com to sign up for our newsletter, to look at our future events, and to sign up for that coming up next week. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Toni, for sharing
Thank
all of
you.
your knowledge and your beautiful pictures and all of your inspiration. I'm sure we're all going to go out and now look at how sad our yards are and what type of improvements they need. I know that's what I'm going to do. Thank
I
you,
tell you,
everyone.
when I
Yeah,
stand in my yard and I stare, my husband comes out and goes, "Oh no, what's next?"
right.
I'm seeing something, I see
Mhm.
something in my mind and I want to make it happen. So anyway,
Right.
all
Always
right.
some
Well, thank you for
inspiration.
allowing me to do this. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much and have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.